Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Hope you all well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Good to be back to continue with Surat al-Nur. Let's see who do we have with us in the chat. Assalamu alaikum. Good to have you. All right. Nobody else. Let's get my presentation on the way because it is a late start and I do want to try and finish it all. Excellent. Assalamu alaikum, Nico. Hope you're well. Ahmed Hassan, good to see you. All right, okay. So for those who maybe missed last stream or the stream before that, a couple of streams ago, I decided to try, looking at the Qur'an and reading it in a more holistic way in terms of at the surah level. So trying to look at a whole surah and see how it all fits together, rather than the atomized way we usually read the Qur'an, whereby we, investigate one topic or one word, one idea, and look through all of the iterations of that throughout the Qur'an, and then try to come out with, an idea about that, So, looking at kufr or shirk or these sort of things, we've been looking at those in a very atomized way, right? So you take different verses from different surahs, combine them all together to try to get the whole view. It is still a holistic view from the Quran, but it's in the end, those verses are in different surahs, and they're in different surahs for a reason, right? And so trying to look at a single surah as a whole and see how its parts fit together, sort of a next step that I'd like to go on here. Okay, so just remind about that. So if you haven't seen that, please you might want to go and watch the first part of this, the last stream 110. So we're going to continue with this. All right, okay. Jazakallah khair. All right, so let me get my full screen shared. There we go, and let's get my, all right, and here's the surah. Okay, so we stopped around here, right? We stopped at these similitudes, examples of those who have no light, right? That's where we stopped. So that's around here. Okay, so not really a recap. I'm just going to go back a little bit. So, the beginning of the surah, of course, all talks about, from the start, it talks about, issues regarding zina and sexual purity and impurity, lowering the gaze, all of that stuff is over here, staying away from fahisha of speech, fahisha, in terms of looking, fahisha in terms of your private parts. And it mentions many times purity and zakat, and how you can gain purity. And of course, one thing that the word zakat is linked to also is growth, right? That by purifying, you get to grow. It's just like how you preen a plant, removing away the dead parts allows it to grow and flourish even more. Then we have the verse of God's light, right? And we talked about the similitude of that, and how I see the idea of the tree in that is regarding spiritual traditions, right? Neither of the West or of the East, things that will bring, they will give you the oil that you need to enlighten your heart, right? And then talked about how that light can be found in homes of dhikr, by men of dhikr, and that they will be given the reward in their best. And then we had two examples of the actions of alladhina kafaru, right? So the example of الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا in terms of their actions which are devoid of light. In one example, it was an example of a false light, right? A mirage. And the other one, it's talking about being truly at the bottom of darknesses, covered by darknesses, layers and layers of darknesses, like being at the bottom of the ocean, covered with waves upon waves, and even above that, there are clouds obscuring the sights and the sun's light. Okay. Then it talks about, and this is where we stopped. And he for whom God makes no light, then he has no light. And if I remember, this is where we stopped, right? In these parts. Okay. So the question comes about, right? So where do we have this in this part here of the surah? I don't know if you can see this. Wait a minute, I need to. What was it? That was it, the screen pointer thing. There we go. There we go. Hopefully that lets us be able to see a little bit clearer where I point. So at the end of this verse, it says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجْعَلِ اللَّهُ لَهُ نُورًا فَمَا لَهُ مِن نُور. And whoever God does not make for him light, then he has no light. So of course, then the natural question would be, okay, how do we get this light, right? How can we be such that God will make for us light, right? And I think that's what the next part sort of answers, again in metaphor, right? In metaphor of signs of nature. Don't remember, did we actually go through these verses or not? I should have actually re-listened to where we stopped. But we have two over here, right? So the first part, it says, أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالطَّيْرُ الصَّافَّاتِ كُلٌّ قَدْ عَلِمَ صَلَاتَهُ وَتَسْبِيحَهُ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِمَا يَفْعَلُونَ. Don't you see that God, to him does tasbih, glorifies whoever, men, not ma, not whatever, but whoever. So conscious beings, whoever is in the heavens and the earth and the birds, safat, sort of like in rows in the sky as they fly. كل قد علم صلاته وتسبيحه. Each one knows its salah and its tasbih. والله عليم بما يفعلون. And God knows what they are doing. And it says وَلِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ. And to God belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and to him is the return. So what I see that as indicating here is that the tasbih and salat of those who's in heavens and the earth, which it seems to be the angels, right? And themselves they are beings of light. In heaven and the earth, the tasbih is dhikr. The tasbih is dhikr. And the birds are sort of a metaphor for the angels which soar or fly. And also safat evokes again the salat in mosques, in ranks, right? In group dhikr, right? So just as birds get together morning and evening, right, for their tasbih and dhikr, and you see that, right? The birds in the morning and the evening, they gather and they chirp and chirp and chirp, right? They are making tasbih. That's how the Qur'an views that, right? In the morning and the evening, right? And it's mentioned also earlier after the verse of light about the men who, if we go back and see how it's linked, by the men of dhikr who do tasbih and dhikr and salah in the morning and the evenings as well. الغدو والآصال لا تليهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله, that they are not taken away from the remembrance of God by anything, right? So that's one way in which this verse is indicating that God will make for you light, right? That you should be like the birds, like the angels, engaged in tasbih, right? Engaged in tasbih and dhikr of God, mornings and evenings, right? Just that the angels are constant in tasbih and do not tire. You should likewise try to be that, just as those people mentioned in the homes that God has erected, those men who have the light of God, right? They are not taken away. They do not tire. They're not taken away from the dhikr of God mornings and evenings. يسبح له بالغدو والآصال, right? They are making tasbih to him morning and evening. Going back to it. في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال, right? رجال, men, right? So this is clearly linking back to that, right? Do you not see after the question of, or the statement of, whoever God does not give light, then for him there is no light, then it mentions this, it's mentioned in the, to God does tasbih whoever is in the heavens and in the earth and the birds in ranks, every one of them knows their salat and their tasbih, and God knows what they do, right? So this is a clear indication that this is a way in which you may gain some of that light. And then the next verse says, وَلِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَإِلَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ. And to God is the return. So it's like a return. It's a journey of return. Gaining some of that light will allow you to be able to see the return journey to God, right? The return journey, the return path, right? You need to be able to see to go towards it. And this verse here also would indicate that whoever is in the heavens and the earth, God, they are in God's dominion, and God will utilize them to help you in that return. God will utilize that kingdom to help you in that return. So that's this verse, right? The heavens and the earth. God's is the kingdom, and to him we will return, the return journey to God, and God will use what is in the heavens and the earth to help you in that journey, including all of those in the heavens and the earth, right? The angels, right? In the heavens, because it says here, do you not see that to God make tasbih whoever is in the heavens and the earth, right? Then it says over here, and to God belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, right? And to him is the return. So that's linking these two together as well. And then it says again, do you not see? So again, the verse beforehand, it said, do you not see that God, to him makes tasbih whoever's in the heavens and the earth? And then it says, do you not see, right? So again, we're talking about vision, we're talking about sight, and that of course evokes light. Okay, but in this verse it's talking about Lam tara anna Allah yusji sahaban, right? Do you not see how God brings about clouds, right? Forms clouds. Thumma yu'allifu baynahum, then he puts them together, right? He joins them together, right? So you get these scatterings of cloud in the sky, and then they get joined together. Okay, you get joined together. ثم يجعله ركاما, then he makes them one, on top of each other. فترى الودق يخرج من خلاله, then you see that heavy rain falling from its midst, falling from the midst of these clouds. Okay, falling from this, and also, and this seems to be like almost separate. وينزل من السماء من جبال فيها, he also sends down from the sky from mountains in it. So not just the rukam, not just this piling up over here. Now we're talking about something even more massive, mountains in the sky, right? Don't know if anybody has ever been on a plane when you're sort of landing and you're able to see some of these clouds sideways. They really do look like mountains, like huge mountains. And you can see the rain coming down from them. But anyway, from jimalin fiha min bardin, hail, right? فَيُصِيبُ بِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ, and he allows that to go to whoever he wills, and he diverts it from whoever he wills. And of course, this is a hail and bird, these cold hailstones or snow in the desert, right? These are a real treat. It's better than al-wadq, which is heavy rain. It's better than rain, right? Having this cool hailstones in the desert, or this cool snow coming down in the desert, it's even better, right? So it's a favor. It's a greater favor, right? And he brings it to whom he wills, and he takes away from whom he wills. And then it says right after, yakadu sana barqihi yadhhabu bil absar, the flash of its lightning almost takes away the sight. Okay, so what is the link here? So again, this it's all a metaphor for this sort of like this spiritual accumulation, right? This is something which the Sufis talk about as well, right? That a lot of the spiritual journey is an accumulation of blessings, right? And it's an accumulation of blessings until it is sort of heavy enough for that to rain down on you. Okay, so that's the sort of the metaphor being given here, right? That, you know, if you take it including the previous verse, which is talking about tasbih, morning and evening, right? So if you're engaged in that kind of dhikr, that kind of tasbih, morning and evenings, you're evoking these clouds of blessings, right? More and more of them. You sort of, they are being created above you more and more, and then they start to join together, and then they become, bigger pieces of rukam, you know, one on top of the other, right? And eventually, you get this pouring of mercy, of blessings down. Okay, so an accumulation, heavy rain or blessings. A larger accumulation, the mountains in the verse, and you get hail or coolness and flash of light and the flash of lightning. Okay, so again, this verse again, it starts off saying, "Do you not see how God makes storm clouds and lightning that almost takes the sight?" So let me just read what I actually wrote here. So it's a metaphor for spiritual accumulation and its results, right? That's what it seems like to me. The opening of the floodgates, right? That you fill up your dam until it bursts forth, right? The outpouring of the dam, right? So you're filling up these clouds, and then eventually it rains, right? This heavy rain comes down. And what is like, you know, when you have those very large raindrops, you know, sometimes you have like rain where it's like a drizzle, and now sometimes where you have this rain where each raindrop is, you know, bigger than normal. Okay, that's al-Wadq. So as you engage in dhikr tasbih, you are driving towards yourself clouds of blessings, of insights, of realizations. Okay, they then get joined together to become a whole, from which you'll see heavy rain, heavy blessings, heavy mercy, you know, water for growth, water for zakat, for purification, come down from its mists, come down from this accumulation of realizations and blessings, which you get, right, as you meditate, as you engage in dhikr, as you engage in tasbih, right? And if that accumulation is large enough, like a mountain, something even better than rain is sent down, because the verse says, it doesn't just say, like here it says, the wadq, the rain, just comes out. يَخْرُجُ مِنْ خِلَالِهِ, comes out from its midst. But when it talks about the hail, God says, وَيُنَزِّلُ, He brings it down. وَيُنَزِّلُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ, and He brings it down, right? So if you have an accumulation which is even bigger, like a mountain, then something better than rain is sent down, right? So it doesn't just come out. Here it's symbolized with hail or ice drops, okay, which is a superior treat in the desert than just rain. And God given it to whom He wills, and withholding it from whom He wills, right? So the idea that you'll always get this rain coming from these clouds, these accumulation of clouds, but this added blessing of this hailstones or coolness, right? This even better sort of like blessings. That is something which God will give to whom He wills and withhold from whom He wills, right? And from it comes, and from it or with it comes this flash of lightning, right? This flash of light, this flash of insight, this realization. What the Sufis would say, the opening, right? Where you know, your heart gets enlightened. You know, going back again to the verse of light, you fill the lamp of your heart with oil. Slowly, you're pressing, you know, from the tree of a tradition, you're pressing out oil into your heart more and more and more, and eventually, you know, it's you know, the oil itself is, you know, bright enough, almost glows, but then it needs a spark. It needs a spark in order to inflame it, right, to light the lamp. It's a similar sort of idea here, right? You're talking instead about the accumulation of clouds, right, of blessings, of clouds, and they gather and gather and gather until eventually they pour out with rain, or they pour out with rain and hail, and on top of that, you can have a flash of lightning, which you know, takes out your sight almost, right? It takes your sight away from this world to the to the upper world. And over here, I've also put in just something about how lightning forms, right? So the creation of lightning is a complicated process. We generally know what the conditions are needed to produce lightning, but there is still debate about exactly how a cloud builds up electrical charge and how lightning forms. So scientists think that the initial process for creating charge regions in thunderstorms involves small hail particles called gropel that are roughly 1/4 millimeter to a few millimeters in diameter and are growing by collecting even smaller supercooled liquid droplets. When these gropels particles collide and bounce off of smaller ice particles, the gropel gains one sign of a charge, and the smaller ice particles the other sign of the charge. Because the smaller ice particles rise faster in updrafts than the gropel particles, the charge on ice particles separates from the charge on the gropel particles, and the charge on ice particles collects above the charge on the gropel. Right? Bottom line, hail is involved. Right? Hail is involved, and you start to get this buildup of charge, and eventually you get the lightning coming down. Right? So that is. It's apt metaphor for what is being mentioned here, right? These small particles, right, of what's it saying, 1/4 of a millimeter even, right, or a few millimeters in diameter, right? Many of them, right? Each one a tasbih, each one you're saying subhanallah and meditating with it, right? And it accumulates until you have enough charge that it discharges as lightning, right? So that's what's being mentioned here. And then again, we have another short verse after it. So in the previous metaphor regarding the tasbih of everything in the heavens and the earth and the birds, especially doing their tasbih and their salat, right? After it, we have this small verse which says, وَلِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتُ, and to God is the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and to him is a return. And again, here we have this metaphor of the clouds and the blessings that are being accumulated. And then afterwards, we have another one which is a small terse verse. This one says, يُقَلِّبُ اللَّهُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَعِبْرَةً لِأُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. God changes night into day. Now note, it doesn't say day into night, right? Another verse when it's talking about these things, he's the one who changes night to day and day to night, right? Here it's just talking about going from a night to day, right? Which is again apt for the surah, which is about nur, about light, about God giving you light. So again, we're going back to this verse over here, and whoever God does not give light, for him there is no light, right? So if you're in night, God needs to give you light so you can be in day, right? إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لِعِبْرَةً لِأُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ. Truly in that is a ibrah for those who have sight. And the interesting thing is the previous verse talks about how that flash of lightning almost takes away your sight. What does that mean? It takes away your sight from this lower world, right? So once you've had this sort of spiritual realization, it takes away your sight from this world, but then you are given light or sight in a more comprehensive way that encompasses this world and the next, the lower world and the higher world. Okay, يقلب الله الليل والنهار إن في ذلك لعبرة لأولي الأبصار. And note also how the word being used here is يقلب, which comes from qalb, from heart, right? So God turns the heart, right? So it's just an indication, right, that the word being used here, it's not yulij al-layla wan-nahar. It's not that God shifts as in other verses, right? So that's why I put these two in these sort of like different forms, right? So you've got the two metaphors here, and they're being linked to a short terse verse. In this one, it was about the heavens and the earth, and here it's about night and day. So thus God changes, and the word yuqallib evokes the heart, right? God changes the night of the heart to day. Okay, in that is a sign, a lesson, something to think about for those who have some insight or some vision, some spiritual insight or some vision, right? So these verses here are the answer to the question that you would naturally ask: how does one gain this light? And it is directly linked to the verses which are about light, right? Um, then God is the light of the heavens and the earth, and the example of His light, right? Um, that it's in the heart and with people of dhikr, right, in homes of dhikr, of tasbih, and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's up to here. And then we have another verse which I think it is again related back to this. So these verses here, which all seem to be talking about, you read them normally about signs of nature. That this is just now the Quran has gone into a tangent about signs of nature, right? If you weren't trying to do a holistic view of the surah, that's what you would just say. Okay, this is just a tangent, and why is it there? Doesn't seem to make any sense, right? Okay, we were talking about God's light in the heavens and the earth, and in the mosques, and then those who don't have light, and the example of those who have kafaru and their actions, and like a mirage, and like in the bottom of a dark sea, and then we suddenly have this tangent about how birds make tasbih, and they have their own salat, and then about the rain, how that comes about, and how lightning comes about, right? It won't make sense if you're not trying to link all of these things together. And in the same way, this next verse, which says, "Wallahu khalaqa kulla dabbatin min ma." God created every crawling thing, dabba, from water. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَمْشِي عَلَى بَطْنِهِ. And so among them are those which go up on their belly, right, like snakes and the like. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَمْشِي عَلَى رِجْلَيْنِ. And from them are those who move upon two legs. And among them are those who move upon four. يَخْلُقُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ. God creates what He wills. إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. God is able to do all things. So how is that linked to the rest of that, to what's gone before? Well, once you have light, you're able to move, right? And the extent of your light will dictate how quickly you can move, right? So the way I see this part, right, it's talking about creation and recreation. So it's talking about, yes, God creates. Allahu khalaqa kulla dabbatin min ma. He created every dabba from ma, right? It's a progression. There's a progression going here. You've got from ma, from water, to something crawling on its belly, to something going on two legs, to something going on four legs. What does that evoke? That evokes a change in speed, right? The things which crawl upon their belly are generally slow, and those which go on two legs are faster, and those which go on four legs are even faster, right? And then it could be a progression even more than that. It's almost like an exponential progression here, right? We've gone from 1 to 2 to 4. What would be next? 8, right? So God created every dabba from water. Some crawl on their stomachs, some on two legs, some on four legs, etc. And some maybe on 8, kind of exponential progression. So the water mentioned in the previous metaphor, the heavy rain, with it and with it, and with or without flashes of light from heaven, God gives life to the dead, right? So this is a common theme in the Quran, how water sent down from the heavens brings you to life, right? So when it's talking about here, Wallahu khalaqa kulla dabbatin min ma, God created every dabba from ma, you could think of it as brought to life every dabba, right? That which was dead, God brought it to life. Okay. He gives life to the dead by that water. So some start to be able to crawl to Him, right? And it's again going back to وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ, and to Him is the return. To God is the return. Okay, how will you return to God? Will you return crawling on your belly, or a bit faster on two legs, or even faster on four legs, right? It's up to you how quickly you return to God, right? So some start to be able to crawl to Him, then some are given more. They have more water, more light, and move faster on two legs. Then the others are given still more and move faster on four legs. So this is the metaphor for moving towards God. Now that you have some day in you, some of your night has been changed today, you can start to move. Right? You can start to move. يُقَلِّبُ اللَّهُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ. God changes the night to day. Truly, and that is an ibrah, ulil absar, is a lesson for those who are able to see. Right? Once you're able to see, you as a dabba need to move. Right? You need to start to go back to God. Return to Him is a return. So this is a metaphor for moving towards God, and how and now that you have some day around you or in you, in your heart, as opposed to night, then you can move and advance forward. And the amount of life or blessings or rain given to you will determine how much legs you have. So how much legs do you have to move with, right? And so how fast you can move forward, right? And this is, it also, evokes the verse in Surat Fatir, which talks about the angels. Some having 2 legs, some having wings, some having 2 wings, some having 3, some having 4, right? In the same way, right? It's talking about the human being. And then that sort of closes off this section, right? So then we have after that, لَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا آيَاتٍ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. And we have thus sent down clear signs or clarifying signs, right? And God guides whom He wills to the straight path. So this is closing. This is another one of those closing statements, which you find in the surah. Did I link this back to another one over here? There are a number of them where it sort of like almost signs off that whole section, right? Because remember, right at the start of the surah, it's saying, سورة أنزلناها وفرضناها وأنزلنا فيها آيات بينات, and we sent in it آيات بينات. And after each section, it iterates that, and we have truly sent down آيات بينات. There was one over here. Was it? تشهد عليهم سمعهم وأبصارهم. There was a couple of others, but I mean, there's one here, of course. وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكُمْ آيَاتٍ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ here. And the one we just did. Well, there's another one here. وَلَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا آيَاتٍ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ, right? So these sort of close off those sections. And so now we have opening up to a new section, sort of, right? So verse 46, very similar to verse 34, seems to be saying that the previous section are clarifying signs, but God will guide to the straight path whoever He wills. So the link is that to follow a path, you have to be able to see it. So in this verse, it talks about يهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم, right? He guides whomever He wills to the straight path, right? And so you have to be able to see it, and to see it, you need light. So perhaps if one is able to see the light of God, who is the light of the heavens and the earth, in the previous narrated signs, then it is possible. It is a possible indication that you can see the light of guidance to the straight path, or perhaps contemplation of these signs will start, the light inside you, like a fire touching an oil lamp. Okay, and so we get to this next part, which is a part that confused me for a long time, right? So this whole next section from verse 47 up to 56 over here, it's all about obedience to the messenger, right? It's all about obedience to the messenger primarily, right? And I mentioned this in one of the last streams, right? So in stream 106, I mentioned that there's a obedience heavy section in the surah, right? So if you go back to that stream, to that live stream, or maybe check the notes if you have the link to my Obsidian Vault that I put. So a section in this surah was mentioned as obedience heavy passage, right? In which is the instance of obey the messenger. So in this section of the surah, we have obey the messenger without including obey Allah. So it's the instance in the Quran where we have obey the messenger without including obey Allah. So, I've mentioned this before, but in the Quran, it's always coupled together. Obey Allah and obey the messenger. Obey Allah and obey the messenger. There is never obey Allah alone in the Quran. But there is an instance of obey the messenger mentioned alone, right? And it happens in this surah, in this section. So at first, what I wrote about this is also in the surah is the only commands which come to us deliberately, indirectly from the messenger. So if we go back to the verses where the Prophet is commanded to tell us, right? قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, where is it? This, right? So this verse here about lowering your gaze. We are not commanded to just lower our gaze. It isn't Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, or you who have faith, lower your gaze, right? Instead, it's indirect, right? These are the only indirect commands in the Quran, right? As far as I can gather right now, right? Where the Prophet is told to say to the believers, right? So God isn't commanding the believers, He's commanding the Prophet to tell the believers. He's saying, قُل, say, O Muhammad, لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, say to the believers, say to the mu'mineen, يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, to lower their gaze. وَقُل لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, and say to the believing women, to the faithful women, يَغُضُّضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, to lower their gazes, right? When I first came across this section, I thought, okay, why is this section, obedience to the messenger section, heavy in the surah? The only link that I could make was that in the same surah we have the only instance where the messenger is being commanded to command us, right? Commanded rather than us being commanded directly, right? So in this surah, the only also in this surah is the only commands which come to us deliberately, indirectly from the messenger, i.e., say to the mu'mineen or the mu'minat. So this could be linked via seeing that the stand-alone obey the messenger is actually referring to those commands. It's referring to, say, O Muhammad, to the mu'minina, the mu'minat, to lower their gazes. So when this verse has it, obey the messenger, it's telling you to obey the messenger in his saying to the believers, lower their gazes, right? But that's definitely true. That link is there, right? It's undoubtedly true, but it's a small thing compared to the size of the section, right? The section is much longer, right? So if we just go through the points from verse 47 to 56, this section revolves around obedience to the messenger specifically, right? That's what I wrote here. So it says, that truly the faithful are obedient, that the truly faithful ones are obedient to Allah and His messenger and fully submit to His judgment. It mentions that others say they will obey, but then they turn away. They turn away when they are called to the judgment as well, but rush to judgment when it's in their favor. So when they're called for God and His messenger to judge among them, they turn away. But if they know the judgment is in their favor, they rush to it. They come quickly, right? And these people are said to either have a disease in their hearts, or they have doubts, or they have a fear that God and His messenger will do injustice to them. Okay, and there's a translation. There's a slow, subtle transition in these verses from verse 47 to 56. There's a transition from obedience to God and His messenger to just obedience to the messenger, right? We'll have a look at that in a minute. And some of the background or examples brought up to furnish these points hint at military contexts, right? So one of us says we will go out, right? They say we will go out. It means we will go out to battle, right? And one verse talks about how God will establish the faithful on the earth, right? And then we have verse 56, which ends with establish salah and give zakat and obey the messenger so that you may receive mercy, which of course links back again to the verse of light, which talks about those who have light establishing salah and giving the zakat, right? And so this links back to the verse of the light and those men who establish zakat, salat and give zakat in mosques, in homes where is God's light. Okay, so that idea is that those who have light are obedient to the messenger, it seems, right? That's what this section seems to be going for. That those who have, if we were to link it with the rest of the surah, it said that those who have God's light will be obedient to the messenger, they will submit to his judgment, right? And they will say, we obey, right? Without bravado, without anything like that. So let me just quickly go through these verses and sort of translate them on the fly. And they say, we have faith in God and in the messenger, and we obey. Then some of them turn away after that, and those are not mu'mineen, they are not true believers. وَإِذَا دُعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ, and if they are called, and this will be evoked later about don't make the call of the messenger like the call of you to each other. That happens at the end of the surah. But here it says, and when they are called to God and his messenger so that he may judge between them, some of them again turn away. مُعْرِضُونَ وَإِنْ يَكُنْ لَهُمُ الْحَقِّ يَأْتُوا إِلَيْهِ مُذْعِنِينَ. But when they have the right, they come to it, rushing, willingly, loudly. أَفِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. Is it that in their heart there is a disease, right? Do their hearts have a disease? And if your heart has a disease, what does that mean? Your heart is dirty. If it's dirty, it's not that clear glass that's mentioned in the verse of light, right? It won't have God's light in it, right? Heart which is dirty will not have God's light in it. Heart which is diseased will not have God's light in it. So it says, أَفِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. Is it that in their hearts there is a disease? Or is it that they doubt? أَمْ ارْتَابُوا أَمْ يَخَافُونَ أَنْ يَحِيفَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ وَرَسُولُهُ. Or is it that they fear that God will be unjust to them and his messenger? So now we have a sort of separation. So isn't يَحِيفَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ عَلَيْهِمْ? Isn't that God and his messenger will be unjust to him? It mentions that God will be unjust to them and his messenger. So there's a separation, right? There's a bit of separation here. The messenger himself will have his own judgments, and he also will not be unjust to them. And it ends up, بَلْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Rather, they are the unjust. And then it says, إِنَّمَا كَانَ قَوْلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Truly the saying of those who have faith, truly faithful, when they are called to God and his messenger so that he may judge between them, that they say, we hear and we obey. سِمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And they are the ones who are successful. وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَخْشَى اللَّهَ وَيَتَّقِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ. And whoever obeys God and his messenger and fears God and has taqwa of him, then they are the successful ones. Then it says, وَأَقْسَمُوا بِاللَّهِ جَهْدَ أَيْمَانِهِمْ. And they swore by God the highest of their oaths, that if you command them, لَإِنْ أَمَرْتَهُمْ, if you, Muhammad, the messenger, if you command them, they will go out. Meaning they will go out to battle. Say to them, قُل, say to them, Muhammad, لَا تُقْسِمُوا, don't make any oaths. طَاعَةٌ مَعْرُوفَةٌ, obedience is known. Real obedience is known. إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. God knows what you do. Now this is, of course, here is that transition I mentioned, where it's really talking about obedience to the messenger. It's not talking about obedience to God and his messenger. It's about obedience to the messenger, right? Because they're saying, if you command them, they will go out. You, O Muhammad, now say to them, don't make these oaths. Obedience is known. Obedience to himself, right? To the messenger, right? And then it says, قُلْ أَطِيعُوا. And then it says again, goes back to saying, obey God and obey the messenger. قُلْ أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ. Obey the messenger and obey God and obey the messenger. And again, there's this separation. It's not أطيعوا الله ورسوله. It's not obey God and his messenger. It's obey God and obey the messenger. فإن تولوا فإنما عليه ما حمل. But if they turn away, upon him is his burden, and upon you is your own burden, right? So if they turn away from what? If they turn away from what he commands, right? Then upon him is his burden, and upon them is their burden. وَإِن تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا. But if you obey him, you will be guided. So again, there's this transition from obedience to God and obedience to the messenger. And now we're talking about obedience to the messenger only. تَهْتَدُوا وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. And the messenger only has to convey. Okay. And then it says, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنكُمْ. God has promised those who have faith and do good deeds among you that He will establish for them, He will establish them on the earth, just as He established those before them, and He will make firm their deen, their judgments. And this again goes back to how in the surah we've seen that deen is talking about, judgments mostly, right? He will establish for them their judgments, that He is happy of them. And He will exchange for them their fear for safety. They are in servitude to me, ibadah to me, and not in shirk. And this again shows you that ibadah, shirk is about ibadah. And that's why they're being put here. يَعْبُدُونَنِي لَا يُشْرِكُونَ بِي. They are in ibadah to me without any shirk. Right? لا يشركون بي شيئا ومن كفر بعد ذلك فأولئك هم الفاسقون. And whoever turns away after that, then they are a fasiqun. And it ends وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ, and establish salah and give zakat and obey the messenger so that you may receive mercy. Right? So that's that section here, which again, like I said, puzzled me. Yes, there's that link about how in the same surah we have God commanded the messenger to command us, but there has to be a bigger link to that, to the rest of the surah. And so, I mean, it became obvious to me later, but it's again, for me, the sign of seeing that something seems right is that it seems obvious after you discover it, right? It seems very obvious after you discover it. And beforehand, you might wreck your brain and you can't really figure it out. But then once you hit up on it, you think, you slap your forehead and you think, oh my God, why didn't I see that? Right? So the idea is that those who have this light are obedient to the messenger. Let's just summarize something about this a little bit. So the idea is that those who have this light, right, the mu'mineen, because here in these verses what's being contrasted is that there are those who are obedient to the messenger and those who are not obedient to the messenger. Those who will submit to his judgments and those who will not submit to his judgments, right? Those who, when they are called, when he calls to them and asks them, let's, go out, for battle or for whatever, there are those who say we hear and we obey, and there are those who say that, but it's just false bravado and they don't really follow through, right? So the idea is that those people who have light in their hearts, they are of course going to be the ones who obey the messenger or not. Of course, the ones who obey the messenger. So the idea is that those who have this light are obedient to the messenger. But why is that here? Okay, why here? Why is this in this surah? Why is this section about obedience to the messenger in this surah right after the verse that speak of God's light and those who have it and those who don't, and how to acquire it? Okay. Yes, there's that one section that is those who have light are the ones who are going to follow, but also the main thing also is that the link is that, of course, the messenger himself is described as being sent as a light. Go ahead, set as a light. He's been described in other verses in the Quran as being sent as a light, and in fact, in other verses, he's being called a lamp. Right, a shining lamp, right? The messenger is called a shining lamp, right? Sirajan munira, right? And that's very similar again to the verse of light. The verse of light talks about what? It talks about a lamp, right? Misbah, right? Different words being used, right? And they are different in the end, but in the end, of course, we are talking about actual lamps. A siraj is a lamp, and the misbah is a lamp, right? So that's the other side of this key link, right? Yes, those who have God's light will obey the messenger, but also we need to understand the reason why they do that is because they have the insight to see that the messenger himself is sent as light. The messenger himself is a siraj munira. He is a light-giving lamp, right? He is somebody who, if you talk about those in mosques and those people of dhikr and those mentioned in the verse right after the verse of light. The rijal, the light is in the homes. God has allowed to be raised, in which tasbih is done in the morning, evening. And it says rijalun, by who? By rijal, by men whom neither trade nor commerce divert them from the remembrance of Allah and establishing Salah and giving zakat, etc. Right? So if that's true of these men, right, they have this light. How much more true is it of the Messenger himself? Right? Of course, it is much more true. In fact, he becomes an embodiment of that verse itself. Like the Allah Nur samawati wal ard, the example of his light is like a misbah, is like a lamp, right? Who is a bigger embodiment of that than the one whom the Quran itself says is sent and described as being sent as a lamp, right? As a shining lamp, right? So the greatest embodiment of this this verse, right, is the shining lamp, the Prophet, right, the Messenger. Okay, so let me just read what I put over here. The Messenger is a light and was sent as a light. So recall the verse Sirajun Munira, right? That Inna arsalnaka shahidan wa mubashiran wa nadhira. We have sent you as a witness and a bringer of good tidings and a warner, and as a light giving lamp, Sirajun Munira, right? Inna arsalnaka shahidan wa mubashiran wa nadhira. Sorry. وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ, and a caller to Allah and by His permission, and a light-giving lamp, right? So if Allah's light is found in the homes, in the houses God has allowed to be raised for dhikr, and in the hearts of men who are found there and who engage in tasbih morning and evening and are not distracted by dunya from dhikr, salat and zakat, then how much more so is it to be found in the Messenger of Allah, who himself is mentioned as a prime example of dhikr, right? And recall my video about the difference between the uswa and the sunnah, right? So the Quran talks about how the Prophet is an excellent uswa in what? In his dhikr to Allah, in his hope in the last day, and his remembrance of Allah a lot, right? So an indication of seeing or understanding what God's light actually is being able to recognize it in the homes of dhikr and in the men that frequent them, right? In the men and the women of dhikr. And in the same way, an indication of having that light or seeing that divine light or understanding that divine light is being able to recognize it most brilliantly in the Messenger of Allah, and to thus have full faith in him, right? To have full faith in the Messenger of Allah, to see yourself blind in comparison, and perhaps actually blind in some things completely, and thus be able to have full trust in him and submission to his judgment, right? And obedience to him, right? We're talking again about the Messenger here. We're not, before some hadith guys come along and say that this is about, no, it's not about obeying hadiths, right? We're talking about the Messenger himself, right? So it's about that, right? So obeying him and following him just as a blind man would, right? But because you have enough sight yourself to recognize that he is a person who can see, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? Well, that's only true if the blind people have enough sight to recognize the person who has one eye, right? You have to be able to understand the person who has one eye to be able to allow him to be king, right? And full obedience to him, so that perhaps one can be shown mercy. Okay, so he was sent as a mercy anyway, right? Remember, he was sent as Rahmatun lil Alamin, mercy to the world. So that's again at the end of this. Where are we? Here at the end of this section, it says, Waqimus, and establish salah and give the zakat and obey the messenger so that you may receive mercy. Well, the mercy, he is the mercy to the worlds, right? Rahmatun lil Alamin. Thus, those who have the true light of faith, they submit to the messenger's judgment, saying, we hear and we obey. They will go out to battle if he commands. No pledges of bravado, just obedience. As for those who don't, then upon him is only what as for those who don't obey, then upon him, the messenger, is only what he has been burdened with, right? Made to carry, responsible for. That's this verse over here, right? Allah, say obey Allah and obey the messenger. But if they turn away, then upon him is only what the burden which he has been given, right? Upon him is only what he has been burdened with, made to carry, or responsible for, and upon them is what they wish to do or to carry, right? وَعَلَيْهِمْ وَعَلَيْكُمْ مَا حُمِّلْتُمْ, right? But if you were to obey him, this one who has more light than any of you, right? Who has more light than any of them, and who sees better than any of them, then they would be guided, right? وَإِن تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا, but if you obey him, you'll be guided, right? وَإِن تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ, and upon the messenger there is nothing but to convey, right? Yet still upon him is only to convey. And then God promises that through this obedience to the messenger, and this is talking about those at the time, of course, God has promised them that those of them who do good works and if they have faith and do good works, that he will establish for them, he will make them caliphs, he will make them inheritors of the earth, just as he calls those before them to inherit the earth, and he will make firm for them their deen, that he is happy with them, and he will change their fear to safety and give them safety or security, while they are in ibadah to him, committing no shirk, and whoever is ungrateful after such a promise, they are the fasiqeen, right? So to be ungrateful regarding such a promise, and that is fusuq, right? So once more, establish salah and obey, and zakah and obey the messenger. Establish salah and give zakah and obey the messenger, so that you may receive mercy. Now I have here a link to other verses, which when you start to see how often the messenger is linked with light, linked with bringing us out of darkness into light, etc. I'll go over this later because even though it's relevant, remember we're trying to do a reading of a surah as a whole, a holistic reading of a surah as a whole, before linking it to other parts of the Qur'an, right? Even though I did mention, of course, that the messenger is called a lamp in other verses as well, but that's how I was able to make that link in this verse. Okay, so that's what this section is about, right? So if we go back a little bit again, so we had those verses of light, right? Then how الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا are in darkness, and the two metaphors for that. Then these imagery or metaphors about how to gain God's light, right? And the result of that. And then we had that sort of signed off, and then we had this talk of obedience to the messenger, right? So it's like a progression, saying that now here we're talking about obedience to one who has gained all of this already, right? Who has been through all of that, and so he's worthy of being obeyed. Okay. This last verse over here, verse 57, right? So verse 57, it talks about الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. So after this section, it says, لا تحسبن الذين كفروا معجزين في الأرض. Do not think that الذين كفروا, those ingrates, will frustrate upon the earth, will frustrate God's plan on the earth, and their final abode is the fire and an abysmal destination. الذين كفروا here, I think it's mostly going to be referring to believers. It's going to be talking about the Muslims. It's not going to be talking about non-Muslims. It's going to be talking about the non-Muslims who, at the time, about the Muslims who at the time will not obey the messenger, right? Because to not obey the messenger when you know all of this about him, that's a sign that it's ingratitude, that God is giving you someone who can guide you, right, out of the darkness into light, and you decide to, I'm not going to follow that, then that's ingratitude. Okay, the ingratitude to God and His Messenger by not obeying Him will not cause frustration on the earth. Okay, I'm almost done. The next two sections, I don't really have as much to say on them, but we return once again after that. We return once again to talk about etiquettes of, general etiquettes to avoid zina, to avoid fahisha, and these sort of things. So the first one, it's speaking about permission during the free times of nakedness among the Arabs, right? So people use this to talk about to say that these are the names of the salah and the times of salah. I don't agree with that, but the point is that it's talking about here that let those who are in your power, so captives or servants, okay, let them seek permission from you, including وَالَّذِينَ لَمْ يَبْلُغُوا الْحُلُمَ مِنْكُمْ, and those who have not reached sort of like maturity among you. Let them seek permission from you 3 times, before Salat al-Fajr, and when you take off your clothes during sort of like the siesta, the noon time after Zuhr, and after Salat al-Isha. These are 3 naked times for you. So be wary of them. Then it says when the young children as well, they of course can just roam about normally, but when they reach al-hulum, they must also seek permission to enter, right? And then it talks about women, older women, how they are allowed to dress less conservatively, right? Those women who are older and they're not looking for marriage, they're allowed to يضعن ثيابهن, to put down their clothes a little bit, غير متبرجات بزينة, without trying to display their zina. وأن يستعففن خير لهم, but that they should continue to be chaste and still continue to dress modestly. It's better for them, even though they have that option. And then it talks about how about meal times and eating together or in groups, right? So there's that section. So we went back again to this topic, right? So it's a very odd kind of ebb and flow, right, in the surah, that we go back and forth to these issues, right? To these issues about sexual etiquette and protecting society and putting things in place. So we're going from these very high spiritual topics, right, of God's light, to almost these mundane things, right? So H is talking about that there's no blame on you, that you should eat alone or in groups, right? That sort of thing. And then we have the last section again. Now it's a return back to speaking about the messenger, right? So in the last section, إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله وإذا كانوا معه على أمر جامع لم يذهبوا حتى يستأذنوه. That those who are truly mu'mineen, those who are truly faithful, are those who have faith in God and His messenger, and who, if they are with Him upon a sort of like united cause, amrin jami'in, doing something all together, they won't leave until they seek His permission. They won't just go until they seek His permission, right? They will ask His permission before they leave. Okay. إن الذين يستأذنونك أولئك الذين يؤمنون بالله ورسوله. Those who seek permission from you, so indicating there were others who didn't at the time. Those who seek permission from you before they leave, they are the ones who truly have faith in God and His messenger. So when they seek permission from you for some of their own needs, then give permission to whomever you want from them, and seek forgiveness for them. Ask God to forgive them, right? Truly, God is forgiving, merciful, right? And then next verse says, do not make the dua, the call of the messenger, between you or among you, like the call of some of you to each other. God knows those who try to slip away from his commands, right? To slip away from obedience to Him, right? To sort of get out of obeying Him. God knows those among you, right? And so let them be wary, those who who go against his commands, يخالفون عن أمره, and تصيبهم فتنة, that maybe a tribulation, trial will come to them, or there will come to them a grievous penalty, right? So that's that last section over here, right? Again, it is a shift, it is a sign of faith and recognizing God's light and faith in it that will lead the mu'mineen to have such deference and respect to the messenger. So even when it isn't a requirement, right? Even though this isn't a requirement, right? That they seek permission from the messenger, when they need to just leave a gathering that they're in or something like that, right? It's not something which is a requirement, but it's a sign of those who truly have, whose hearts are filled with God's light, right? That they have this deference, respect for the messenger, even when it isn't, required. And when they are all together with him on an affair, they look to him for leadership, right? They will look to him for leadership. They won't leave without his permission. Then it says, do not make the call of the messenger like the call of you to each other. God knows those who try to slip away from obedience to him. So they should be aware those who dissent from his command, that there may come to them because of that a fitna or a grievous punishment. And then the very last verse, of course, ties it all, just ends it all. ألا إن لله ما في السماوات والأرض قد يعلم ما أنتم عليه. Truly to God is whatever is in the heavens and the earth, and he knows what you are upon, and he knows the level of your faith, he knows the level of your light, he knows what you're really on. وَيَوْمَ يُرْجَعُونَ إِلَيْهِ فَيُنَبِّئُهُم بِمَا عَمِلُوا. And the day when they return to him, he will tell them what they did, right? The actions that they did, which again shows you that in the end the accounting is all about your actions. وَاللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. And God is knowing over all things, or knows all things. And that's basically the end of that, right? Don't know how successful it was going through that, but I personally learned a lot from doing this, right? From trying out this meta reading of the surah. It was actually quite amazing. Before we end, I just want to go through some of these, not in the surah but in other surahs, some of these verses which talk about the messenger, right? So the messenger brings us out from darkness to light. So we have this one, ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين وكان الله بكل شيء عليما. So this is that verse, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا. O messenger, O people, O faithful, remember of Allah with great remembrance and do tasbih to him morning and evening. He is the one who does salat upon you, right? He is the one who blesses you. يصلي عليكم وملائكته, and his messenger and his angels. ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور, so that he may take you out of darkness into light. وكان بالمؤمنين رحيما, right? And then we have here يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنا أرسلناك شاهدا ومبشرا ونذيرا. That's that verse that we mentioned before. O Prophet, indeed we have sent you as a witness and as a bringer of good tidings and a warner, and one who invites to Allah by his permission, and as an illuminating lamp, and give good tidings to the believers, and they will have from Allah a great bounty. So these are all verses which are linking light with the messenger, right? So even in this one where it talks about Muhammad is not the father of any man amongst you, right? Right after it says be like the messenger, basically, and be in dhikr kathira, wadhkurullah dhikran kathira, because that's what's mentioned about the messenger, that he is in dhikr all the time, right? And do tasbih for him morning and evening, just like the messengers, just like what's mentioned in the verse of light, right? Those who do tasbih of him morning and evening, and the result of that God will do blessings upon you to take you out of darkness into light, right? Again, I think that's mirroring the messenger who himself, of course, was taken out of darkness into light and was made a lamp. And then we have this verse, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ يَدْعُوكُمْ لِتُؤْمِنُوا بِرَبِّكُمْ وَقَدْ أَخَذَ مِيثَاقَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. And why do you not believe in Allah and while the messenger invites you to believe in your Lord, and he has taken your covenant if you should truly be believers? He is the one who sends down upon his servant, prophet, verses of clear evidence that he may bring you out of darkness into light. Right? هو الذي ينزل على عبده آيات بينات ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور. He's the one who is sending these ayat upon his messenger so that he may take you out of darkness into light. So again, it's linking that again. The messenger is being linked to light and bringing out people from darkness into light. Right? Of course, not just the messenger, our messenger, but the previous messengers. We'll see that about Musa in a minute. It says here, يا أهل الكتاب قد جاءكم رسولنا يبين لكم كثيرا مما كنتم تخفون من الكتاب ويعفو عن كثير. O people of scripture, there has come to you our messenger, making clear to you much of what you used to conceal of the scripture and overlooking much. There has come to you from Allah a light and a clear book. So two things, a light and a clear book. So the light here is of course referring to the messenger, and the book or the scripture referring to the Qur'an, by which Allah guides those who pursue His pleasure to the ways of peace and brings them out of darknesses into light. Right? يهدي به الله من اتبع رضوانه سبل السلام ويخرجهم من الظلمات إلى النور. He brings them out from darkness into light. Right? So again, that's also still linked with the messenger. And we have here, why is this stuck? Okay, there we go. Here we have another verse. Okay, Alif Lam Mim, a book which we have revealed to you, O Muhammad, that you might bring mankind out of darkness into light by the permission of their Lord, to the path of the exalted, the praiseworthy. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alif Lam Ra. كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج, so that you may take the people out of darkness into light. Okay, this one's very explicit in that. Okay, by the permission of their Lord. And then in a verse afterwards, in the same surah, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا أَنْ أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. And we certainly sent Musa before with our signs, saying, bring out your people from darkness into light, and remind them of the days of Allah. And we have this verse in Surat al-Talaq, speaking about the messenger, رَسُولًا يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ لِيُخْرِجَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. He sent a messenger, prophet, reciting to you the distinct verses of Allah, that he may bring out those who believe and do righteous deeds from darkness into light. Right? And whoever believes in Allah and does righteousness, He will admit him to the gardens beneath which rivers flow, to abide therein forever. Allah will have perfected for him a provision. Okay, so those are just side note of some verses which discuss, which link the messenger to light and to bringing people out from darkness into light. Okay. That's about it. Okay, how long was that? An hour and 40 minutes. Not bad. Not bad. I've got some people backstage who I'll bring on in a minute. Okay. So there was a white American man who read the Qur'an and joined ISIS. How do you end up in such darkness? What I mean is, he read the Qur'an, so how he failed to receive its real message and ended up in such a state. It will be because of what surrounded the Qur'an as he learned, right? So probably while he read, just as happened to all of us, right? We are taught. So you're taught probably that you can't understand the Quran alone, right? You need the hadiths, right? And the hadiths explain the Quran, and then of course the scholars have to explain the hadiths and which scholars, and they'll be pointed out to these fanatic scholars, right? From present or past. Okay, so that's what happens. It happens not because of the Quran, it happens because of all the things surrounding the Quran, right? So somebody can, you know, I've never heard of somebody who read only the Quran and stayed away from all of these scholars and dawah people and all of these, ignored all of that and just read the Quran and then ended up joining ISIS, right? There's no link, right? Nobody does that. It's always some extremists, some people who get their claws into them, teaching them that the Quran is not enough, right? And that will be the reason, as far as I can tell. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Ibad.
Walaikum salam. Can you hear me?
Your voice is very low, but yes, I can hear you. If you can increase the mic or something or come closer.
Is it fine now?
No, it's still very low. It's worse now, actually.
Sorry, I think it's my microphone. Just give me a second.
Yeah, it's very, very low. I heard you say, I'm sorry, I think it's mine, and then I couldn't hear the rest. Could you try?
Okay, what about now?
Oh, okay, that's better, yeah?
Okay, it was my microphone actually.
Okay, yeah, no, that's much better.
Okay, yeah, so there is actually one thing that I've noticed about reading the Quran, and it is like one thing that I have understood is when you are trying to read the Quran, first of all, you should accept that everything that I've known about the religion in the past is a lie and I don't know anything. I mean, like, you should approach it like a student. I think only then you can really understand the message.
Yeah, definitely. Without a doubt, yes. Yeah, you need to leave behind a lot of baggage. That's what I see. Some people who I get a lot of like DMs and private questions about different things, and a lot of it, even from including from people who are trying to like put the Quran center, right? They're trying to realign themselves with the Quran. A lot of the times, when somebody messages me and they're saying they're having problems with this or that or the other, it's usually because they've brought in some baggage with them, right, into the Quran. They'll be asking, how can I reconcile this with this? And there's usually nothing to reconcile other than dropping some baggage that they've brought into their conceptualization of what they're looking at.
Yeah, and another thing that I've seen is that most of the people are like kind of scared to leave it all behind, you know. They like need some sort of a guide to show them this
Yeah,
is you should do and this is something you shouldn't do. Like, they
yeah,
don't really want to question anything, and I think uh, that is one of the biggest problems the
yeah.
Muslim world is facing today.
Definitely. It takes some courage because, well, the feeling that they have when in that situation, what I think, they have this feeling of probably similar to how a sheep would feel if he's in a flock and then he goes out from the flock, right?
Yeah,
That sheep starts to feel a bit worried, like I'm alone out here, so the safety in numbers, people feel much more safe and comfortable just going with the crowd, right? Um,
yes,
leaving the crowd and going on your own, it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? So then they get it takes courage, right? They get scared and then worried that am I really And of course, people will tell them that as well. It's not just their own fears. Um, there are also people that will try to um, evoke those fears as well. People that try to increase those fears will tell them, hey, you really think you're right alone and everybody else is wrong and this and that and the other, right? So it, it is difficult to step out of the norm, right? Um,
Mm.
but the trick is, I mean, what I think is that you need to have just a bit more confidence in yourself. There's a lot of bad or false humility that people are taught, right? People are taught to
Yeah.
have this kind of like false humility, right? Oh, I don't
Mm.
know. It's how could I ever understand this? How could I ever know this, right? And that isn't real humility, right? That's just sort of like um, lowering yourself worth from what you are capable of, right?
Mm.
So it takes a bit of confidence to be able to say, to be able to trust your own judgment a bit, to be able to trust what you can understand. You know, you have to be able to
Yeah.
do that a little bit. You can't give up your mind and your reasoning and everything else to other people and let them do the thinking for you, right? You have to have a little
Mm.
bit of confidence to stand on your own reasoning, on your own thinking, on your own ability to understand. Right? You have to have this confidence of being able to say, yes, I will. Why shouldn't I be able to understand this? Right? Why
Yes.
shouldn't I be able to get this? Right? Why should this be
Yeah.
above me? Right? Why is this more difficult than I can understand? Because it
Yeah.
isn't. Right? Most of the deen is simple, right? The deen is easy, right?
Yeah.
But that's what happens, and there's just as you have this false humility, you have this false. I mean, like an example of what that kind of false humility is a sheikh spending like three months or 6 months
Mm.
teaching a class about wudu, right? How to wash
Mm.
yourself for
Yeah.
prayer, right? And they're doing it. It's
Definitely.
that kind of like it's a false humility in terms of um, you're trying to make yourself seem so small compared to the subject, right? By
Mm.
making the subject bigger than it is. So you're increasing the size of this subject of wudu. Oh, it's so big and so complicated and so difficult. And little old me, I need to take 3 months to teach it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of false humility there.
And the other thing that I've noticed is even if like somebody wants to do critical thinking and question something, they would be shut down by this scholars and they would say stuff like, we have spent our whole lifetimes doing this. Do you think you know better than us and all that? And then they would say that if you question too much, you are not a Muslim. So
Yeah.
that that is just something that like really makes me angry sometimes, because
Mm.
the thing is this scholars they rarely talk about the things that are important in Quran, like justice, charity,
Mm.
looking out for your neighbor or relatives. Is it's all like a sport, like you should just recite this many times and all
Mm.
your past deeds will be wiped away,
Yeah.
and all you have to do is pray this much times, and then it will be okay. You can like treat people however you want, especially
Mm.
the non-Muslims.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Mm.
it's true. I mean, can we do that? That's how it is. I mean, the thing about it, what they don't spend any time studying. I mean, I personally think the amount of time that's spent with actual study
Mhm.
isn't time spent in actual study. It's just it's time spent um, just learning what other people are telling you, right? I don't really call that much of study, right? There's hardly any studying involved. It's
Mhm.
just um, um, being molded, right? These scholars, they spend a lifetime not studying but being molded to be like their scholars, right? So it just goes on and on like that.
Yeah, and then now it's like a popularity contest. We have this. guys like Muhammad Hijab, Ali Dawa, and
Mm,
they have like millions of followers, and
mm,
that is like such a messed up thing.
mm.
It like almost makes me hopeless about the future of the Muslim world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, it will go soon because these things don't last. I mean, I'm shocked at that sort of stuff myself. Like growing up, myself in my younger days, the people who we looked up to are completely different, right? We looked up to
Yeah,
people like Hamza Yusuf, like Abdul Hakim
mm,
Murad,
yeah,
people who are very intellectual, who are very, who did a lot of work, right? Um, not YouTube personalities and thugs and vulgar people like that. I mean, it's quite amazing. Um, but that's how it is, right? So, but they just like now, most of the youth, most of that generation, the people, they don't know who Hamza Yusuf is. They don't know, like, the previous sort of like stars. These guys will go away soon as well, right? In a
yeah.
few,
I hope
over,
so.
they'll go away soon. The next generation won't know who they are probably, right?
Yeah,
The
I.
very few who live that long in the public eye.
Mm,
Yeah, it is crazy how, and he's given all these platforms as well, right? Yeah,
yes.
he's putting all these like goes on what's called Pierce Morgan, and
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, and I still remember like 2 years ago when Andrew Tate like converted to Islam. Uh, they were all like celebrating like it was some kind of a victory or something. And now
Yeah,
they are all against him. I think he said something about Palestine. I don't know what
yeah,
happened, but now everybody's hating him again.
yeah, yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah. And one more thing, do you have like any advice for someone who wants to learn Arabic but don't have anyone who I can like communicate with to improve
Mm.
my verbal skills?
Um, and you mean to learn Arabic? Just if it's just for the Quran, you don't really need that, right? But if you want to learn like Arabic generally to be able to speak to others, um, I would recommend speaking to those who had to actually learn it from scratch, right? Don't speak to like natives. Don't ask the advice of native speakers who didn't have to learn it from scratch. Ask others who have done that. I personally don't have much advice. Um, I'm told like what's called those Medina books are very good. Um,
Mm,
and then there are YouTube channels online and they go through them. But I don't really have much advice on that. When it comes to just understanding enough for the Quran, um, there's not much that you need to learn, right? So the vocabulary of the Quran is very very limited, right? It's incredibly
okay.
limited, right? Um, um, just a few, the what is like 200 words make up 80% of the
Mm,
Quran, right? Something like that. But the Quran is, I mean, I think it's amazing. I think you won't find if somebody could do this like analysis and compare other books the same size of the Quran, right?
mm,
And the richness of the vocabulary in the majority of the Quran compared to the richness of the vocabulary compared to the majority of another book, you'll find that the Quran is very, very low. Right? It's incredibly low, right? And that's
yeah,
one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons it's supposed to be like that, right? Because God wanted to make the Quran easy, right? وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ. We've made the Quran easy as a reminder. Most of the very different vocabulary you'll find in the last two juz, I think, right? In Juz Amma and Juz Tabarak, you find the more like sort of new vocabulary. The rest of the Quran, like 28 juz, the amount of vocabulary in the first 28 juz is very, very low. I think incredibly low. So there's that, and then the grammatical constructs as well. They're not very, they're not, too complicated. So I personally don't think it takes much to start to learn and understand the Quran. It doesn't take much at all. Right? You'll be doing reading and understanding the Quran long before you'll be able to read the Arabic newspaper or understand um, Arabic novel or anything like that. Even one made for children.
Yeah, and another thing that I've seen is like Arabic outside of Quran don't really have that vowels, like Zair, Zabar.
They don't have the
Is
what?
it?
Sorry.
I don't know what is the right word. I think they are called vowels.
Yeah, yeah,
Vowels.
yeah. And
Uh,
the tashkil or the harakat, when they're written, they're not really
yeah,
written with the short vowels. Well, you can find some which are written in that format, right? So religious texts they usually have it. Hadith books will usually have it. But yeah, most Arabic in print is not going to have all of the short vowels written in there.
yeah. And one more thing, are you familiar with this guy named the correctional officer?
Yeah, Baba Shuaib.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
approve of his style?
I don't really watch his stuff. I don't have time to see. I've seen some of it,
Yeah.
but I haven't seen much to be honest.
Okay. And one last thing I just wanted to ask. Uh, do you think Quran like promotes stuff like democracy or not?
I don't think I don't think it talks about any of that stuff. I think it's silent, right? When it comes to, and there's a lot of things where the Quran is actually silence upon, right? And it's up to us to decide how we are going to do things, right? So how we are
Okay.
going to, um, um, you know, organize leadership, political leadership in our own communities. It's up to us, right? And the Quran isn't talking about this or that. It mentions just that shura, right? So that we should be able. There should be some form of consultation, right? But that shura could, you could say it's a shura of the aristocracy. It could be of the upper class, or it could be a general shura, like an attempt like of democracy. Um, but it doesn't say, it doesn't give that sort of um, it doesn't give that sort of framework for us to do. The main thing is justice, right? So it doesn't matter
Yes.
really if you have a monarchy or if you have a
Mhm.
democracy or you have communism, whatever. It doesn't matter. The main thing is justice. And it's better. I mean, what would you rather be in a dictatorship where there's
Yeah.
justice, or a democracy where there's injustice? Right? You want justice.
Yes. But
Yeah.
uh, but now that I've noticed, like most of these religious leaders, they like don't really stand much for justice, and the thing that are preached against in Quran, like mostly politicians who support LGBTQ stuff or homosexuality, they are the ones that I've noticed who talk a lot about human rights these days.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I know. But that's just unfortunate. That's the world
Yeah,
that we have right now, right?
yeah,
But no, when it comes to just political authority and these sort of things, Quran doesn't go into it, right?
okay,
It's not
so
tried. A lot of people think the Quran is micromanaging a lot of our affairs. It isn't, right? A lot of the Quran is hands off, right? God gives us some hudud, some limits within which we work, right? So even the laws, the Quran doesn't really give us laws. There are some hudud that are given to us, and we make the laws, right? We make the laws within the limits, within the hudud. Okay, and the Quran
yeah,
talks about تلك حدود الله فلا تعتدوها. These are the limits, the lines of Allah, so don't go beyond them. Okay, well, what about what's before them? What's before them is free. It's free game, right? We can do whatever we want before them, right? Within those limits, we can do whatever we want. We can organize things how we want. What we're not allowed to do is go beyond certain lines God has drawn.
Mhm. And when Quran talks about justice, is it like does it also apply for sinners?
What do you mean?
Like mostly like people who indulge in like zina or homosexuality.
Hmm.
Like should we also treat them with justice?
Yeah, of course, about
Uh,
that, right?
yeah,
Yeah. You're not going to do injustice to them just because they they committed zina, right? You
yeah.
can't be unjust to somebody just because they're a sinner. Um, that's just injustice. You can't. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Uh,
Fine, no problem. It's fine. What's your name, my friend, again? Because I tried to read that.
uh,
Is it Ibad?
yes, Ibad.
Ibad. Okay. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Where are you calling from, by the way?
I'm from India.
Okay. Yeah, this I don't know what's happening right now because I don't check the news very
Yeah,
easily, to
it's
be honest.
really
But
bad down here.
there's something going on now, right? There's like about to be some fighting, or there has been some fighting between India and Pakistan, right?
Not exactly, but I think there is, but there is also a lot of stuff going between Hindu and Muslims.
Hmm. Subhanallah. Well,
Yeah,
inshallah, you're fine. Inshallah, you and your family, you're all okay.
yeah. I actually live in a very small place. There isn't like much crime or anything compared to
Hmm.
other big cities.
Okay. All right. Good. Alhamdulillah. That's good. Stay safe out there then.
You too. Thank you.
Okay. Yallah. Assalamu
Uh,
alaikum. Take care.
Walaikum salam. Take care, brother.
Thank you. All right. Um, okay. I think I'm gonna have to call it a night now. It's getting pretty late where I am, and I gotta get to bed for work tomorrow. Let me just have a quick look. Nico, you're saying stuff. I believe the youth are more corrupt and fanatic than the older generation. Their social media is filled with features and emotional machines, looking to misplace emotions. Yeah, I can see that definitely. Allahumma sincere desire for God should be there. Humbleness for God and critical thinking. Yes, like that. I believe the Hindu Vedas to be the word of God, and as well as I believe it was either revealed to Noah, or some prophets before him. Allah knows best. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I've read a lot of amazing things from the Hindu Vedas, right? Like little snippets here and there, but that's about it. Um, Those as per the Quran, can two individuals, both were righteous, such fulfilling promises and being truthful, polite, can they both get reward of Allah? And despite their assessments of what God's nature is different, yes. So in terms of their beliefs about God's nature, if it's different, yes. I mean, I've said repeatedly, right, that in the end, our judgment is based upon our deeds, our actions, not about our beliefs in God, what we believe or not believe. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Ameen. Okay, I'm going to close it, call it a night. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much for tuning in to that. I'm not sure when is the next time I'll do a type of meta reading for a surah, because um, I mean, these streams not really the best format to be able to do these sort of things. Um, I don't think so anyway. I mean, I'll get some feedback, inshallah, from people in the comments. But next stream will probably be normal, just a small topic. Hopefully, just 20 minutes maximum. And I don't know when we'll do another meta reading, or if somebody wants to come on and try their hand at it, that'll be great. But otherwise, we'll probably be continuing as normal for the foreseeable future. So until 2 weeks' time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Take care.